See some folks joining the room now. We're going to give a few minutes to let everyone join, and then we'll get started.
Oh, that number jumped up.
Okay, I think we will go ahead and get started. Welcome to the Bookstore Panel. Thanks for joining us. My name is Dale Sanders, and I will moderate the session. I have two colleagues here joining me who have developed and implemented innovative programs on their campuses to help promote equity and drive down the cost of course materials for their students. And so I asked each of them if they would come participate in this, because I think what they have to say will be very informative for this group. I'm the director for retail operations for the University of Missouri system. We operate on 4 campuses across the state of Missouri, 6 stores. So a fairly sizable operation. And I've presented at this conference in the past, but I thought it would be nice to invite some fresh faces in, and you can hear from them a little bit. I'm going to give each of them about 15-20 minutes to present the details of their program, and then we will follow up at the end with some questions. So a couple of housekeeping items. Live captioning is available during the presentation. You can toggle this on and off using the attendee controls at the bottom of your screen. This session will be recorded and provided on the conference website following the conference. Copy of the PowerPoint presentations will also be provided on the conference website after the conference. Please enter all questions into the Q&A box. We'll do our best to answer them either at the end or as they're received. We encourage you to engage with us and the other attendees through the chat function. And if you have any technical issues, please contact Tracy Stout. Her email is tracystout@missourystate.edu. So with that, I will introduce Jason Lorgan. Jason is the Executive Director for the University of California, Davis Stores. Jason has spent the last 29 years working in 4 segments of higher education in the state of California, including San Diego State University, Rio Hondo Community College, Golden Gate University, and currently works at the University of California, Davis. He's spent the majority of his career in the textbook space and has also held various roles within student affairs. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jason.
Thank you very much, Dale. I'm going to share my screen here. Hopefully everybody can see my screen now. Okay, so as Dale said, greetings from Northern California, from the Student Union at UC Davis. This first slide sort of talks about both the name of our program, but also it has sort of the 2 primary goals of the program listed, those being increasing access to course materials and reducing inequity within that space. And so our program was sort of inspired by our chancellor's strategic vision for the campus. And within that strategic vision, it asked each department within campus to study every aspect of what they do and look for areas in which there are built-in aspects of inequity. And so one of the things that we noticed is that all students pay the same thing on our campus, regardless of their major or any other circumstance, with the exception of course materials. And so we saw textbooks as a real outlier in the cost sphere. And so that was part of the inspiration of why we created this program. So part of the other inspiration, this next slide sort of shows what's happening. When you think of intellectual property, textbooks at their core are intellectual property. And when we look at other forms of intellectual property that consumers are familiar with, primarily music and movies, we see that things have shifted pretty dramatically over the years. And this chart demonstrates that. All the way on the left is 1973, and all the way on the right is the year 2020. And the blue and the orange shading shows physical products that were sold or rented using individual pricing. And then the green bars on the right side, which are now the dominant model, are digital products that are through a subscription program, such as Spotify or Apple Music. And so it went from individual physical products being really dominant to streaming and subscription being really dominant. And so our program aimed to sort of mimic that. And this slide also sort of demonstrates what we were trying to do. So if you look at the image on the left, that shows how I purchased music when I was a college student. And then if you look at the phone image just to the right of that, it shows how students consume music today. And so then when you look at the brands on the right side of the screen, we realized that our college store was operating using a model very similar to Tower Records, Blockbuster Video, and Borders Books and Music. And you might notice something that those three things have in common, and that they no longer exist. And they sold or rented individual products, physical products, at individual prices. And so we wanted to move our store from that era into the era of the brands represented on the bottom of the screen, such as Spotify, Netflix, Apple Music, and Hulu, who primarily deliver a digital product at a flat rate in a subscription model. And so that's really what equitable access has aimed to be like. So a core component of our program, academic freedom, is ensured. The bookstore does not determine what faculty use in their courses. I often describe academic freedom as like the First Amendment for faculty. It's of paramount importance to them. And so faculty are free to choose whatever they would like, whether those be free resources or paid resources. And the bookstore makes all of those products available through its equitable access program. So a cool feature of this program was really leverages the power of digital. If you think of how most of us dealt with college textbooks when we add or dropped courses, and it always stuns me at the beginning of the term how many students actually do add and drop courses. It's really amazing how often that happens. So whether you bought your book at the bookstore, you would then have to wait online to get a refund and then get a new book, or if you got it on Amazon, you would have to ship your book back to Amazon and get a new book. And I don't think any of us think that that's customer friendly, or any of us appreciate when we have to ship things back to retailers. And so this is a really interesting feature about a digital first program. You can see on this screen that there's a Canvas shell. So if you look on the left of the iPad, or you can see it says UC Davis Canvas, and that's actually a screenshot. And so that's what a book looks like on the left on the iPad. And then on the right, you can see the dashboard. If a student has 4 classes that term, their 4 classes are shown on their dashboard. Then when they click on one of those classes, their reading material is available and looks like it looks on the iPad. So as the student drops the class, they immediately lose access to that content in the LMS. When they're added to the roster, they automatically gain access to that content. And so there's no longer any action on the student. All of the work is with the administration. It's no longer with the student. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the ways that we're putting downward pressure on textbook pricing through this program. And so one of the primary features I mentioned already is the digital first nature of it. So approximately 85% of the units we're delivering through this program are digital, and digital has a significantly lower cost to us, not to mention the convenience factor I already talked about. But even there's other great benefits that our campus is very happy with, like the carbon reduction and not shipping, tens of thousands of textbooks to and from campus all the time. That is completely eliminated now. And so the sustainability aspect of this program particularly when it comes to global warming, is really quite significant and something we're proud of. And so a key component of our program is getting free resources into the program, whether that be from the library or from the OER community. And so we built a really strong partnership with our library that we're super proud of. And so basically how this works is when we get book adoptions, once a week, we send the library over a list of our new book adoptions. They cross-reference that list with their digital titles that they've acquired that have an unlimited amount of simultaneous users allowed, because obviously we can't have it being one of those contracts or digital rights that only allows a few users at a time, because we know that the entire class is going to want to study the night before the exam. And so everybody's going to need to access the material at the same time. So we weren't quite sure how many matches we would find with the library content. And we've been surprised at how many matches we actually have found. So as you can see, 845. So we're in year 2, by the way. So this is our 2nd year of this program. So we're a quarter school. So we are currently in our 5th term. I always like to mention that I don't know why it's called quarter, since there are 3 terms. I would think that should be called thirds, but anyway, for whatever reason, it's called quarters. And so we are in our 5th term currently. And so these numbers are actually to date. So in that time, we've had 845 matches with the library. So what that means is that the bookstore then places that library within Canvas. There's no work for the library other than telling us where the resource is and what it exists. And then we go and place that item in Canvas, just like we place a textbook within Canvas. And then the students can link directly from their Canvas page to that library resource. That also means that the bookstore no longer has to pay for that content. So that significantly lowers the cost of the program for us. And when the cost of the program gets lowered, we can reduce the rate in future years. So 883,000 is how much we've saved so far. But what's interesting is, this is a voluntary program, so students are automatically enrolled, but they can and do opt out. We have thousands of students who opt out every solitary term. But what's sort of cool about this is we're placing this library material on Canvas, and so it's available to students whether they opt out of the program or not. So even for those students who have opted out, they no longer have to purchase that material, and it provides them a savings additionally of 640,000. So when you add those 2 numbers up, you can see that we're already at about 1.5 million or so in savings. And so this is a really cool feature of our program and a great partnership with our library that we're very thankful for. And then also OER. So OER is also a key component of the program. And so we also know that it's very difficult for faculty members to spend the time to model their course around OER materials. And so the bookstore has decided to help promote the use of OER on campus every time there's an OER adoption. The bookstore provides $10 per enrolled student that's assigned OER materials. That is as long as they're a participant in this program. So we're not providing the $10 for students who opt out. And so far we've provided over $81,000 to the Aggie Open project on our campus, which is administered by our library. So we transfer that money to our library. And the library then uses that program to incentivize faculty members to adopt OER into their classrooms. And so once again, when OER is adopted, it provides a tremendous benefit to this program because it reduces the bookstore's cost to administer the program. So in future years, that rate can continue to go down. So the more library content and the more OER content that gets put into this program, the lower the price will go to the student. So something that is an exciting feature about this program. So I mentioned that each year we analyze the cost of the program. And so in year 1, represented by the pink bar, our program cost was $199. And so we reduced that price to $169 through some of these savings that I mentioned with the library and OER and other factors as well. So currently our program's at $169. We have our spring term starts in about 2 weeks. And so when the add drop period has been finalized for the spring term, we will analyze the financial performance of year 2. And then we work with an actuarial sciences firm to do this. And to give you an example, if you're not familiar with what an actuarial science firm might do for a university, so very often they already work with universities in developing student health insurance programs. So we're using the same actuarial science firm that the University of California uses for student health insurance. They're able to look at the cost to deliver healthcare on a college campus, and then they price in risk factors, things like, I used to say measles or flu outbreaks. Now I say international pandemic breaking out. And so they try and price that risk into the price of the health insurance. And so we use that same exact company to do this. Our university also uses that company to help ensure that our pension system is healthy, that we're putting enough money into the pension system so that it will pay it out. So using an external actuarial science firm is something that is very customary within the UC system. It gives it a little bit of external validation, and also helps us make sure that we're managing our costs, because our revenue is fixed because of the flat rate, and the expenses are not within our control because of academic freedom. Faculty can choose whatever or as many materials as they would like as well. And so this helps us manage that risk. So here's some student survey data that we were super excited about. So the orange bar represents our fall 2020 student survey, and the blue bar represents the spring 2021 survey. And you can see the number of students who were surveyed and who replied on the right side of the screen. But this question, was equitable access easier than shopping for textbooks on their own? So the first quarter, we were thrilled with 70% of students saying yes, and thought that was spectacular. But we're even more excited during spring when close to 8 out of 10 students told us that it was more convenient than shopping for textbooks on their own. And I think most of us who have Netflix, for example, would suggest that it's much more convenient shopping for a movie or a television show on Netflix than it used to be when we had to go to Blockbuster. And so we think that's sort of the thought process that students are going through when they answer this question. So another question we asked is, what was your primary reason for remaining in equitable access? And so we kind of thought that the number 2 answer, which got 26%, might be the number 1 answer at saving money on textbooks. But we were surprised to see, in retrospect, maybe not as surprised, but it was easier and more convenient than finding textbooks on my own was the number 1 answer. And again, I'll go back to my Netflix Blockbuster analogy. It makes a lot of sense that we're doing all the work now instead of the student doing all the work. So I mentioned that, we have fixed revenue because there's a flat rate and our expenses fluctuate year to year, and we do our best to evaluate what that cost is going to be. But one of the things that we didn't, but we know that we're not going to be perfect, right? And so we have a reserve that we've built up after the first year in case our costs go higher than expected. And then what do we do if our costs are less than expected? So our old model of textbooks, like most models within really internationally, is textbooks were sold in a for-profit model. And so we have decided as an institution that we no longer feel comfortable profiting from the sale of textbooks. So after we recover our costs, which are primarily the publisher cost and then the salary and benefits of the people who administer the program, that anything that we deemed surplus after that was no longer realized as profit for the institution, but is reinvested into the program, either in the form of a lower price reduction, a lower price rate. So the first year we went from $199 to $169. But our vice chancellor challenged us, and I always like being challenged on equity because we always have to challenge ourselves because you're never finished with your DEI work. It's always something that's in progress. You never complete it. And so one of the comments that was made is, even if you got the price down to $69, wouldn't that still be unaffordable for some of our lowest income students? And so should we find a balance between lowering the rate with our surplus and completely funding the textbook costs for our lowest income students? So we did a mixture this year. We reduced the rate by $30 and we provided textbook scholarships to 3,000 of our lowest income students. We just went to the financial aid office. We said, we want to pay the $169 charge. Please distribute it to the lowest income students at UC Davis, and they took care of that for us. And so that's one of the ethical decisions that we'll be needing to make when we get to the end of this year, is how much do we lower the rate versus how many scholarships do we provide? So we will probably continue to do a combination of those two things, But as the program develops and matures, it will be interesting to see where we land with that thought process, because we've certainly never had that ability to do this before in the old model. And then finally, we applied for an International Learning Impact Award for this program. IMS Global is an organization that provides in the educational technology space that allows different ed tech tools to interact with one another, and they create standards. And so they have a Learning Impact Award that goes out each year. It's international. It's open to everyone in the world, the finalists from 12 countries. And I'm happy to report that the gold medal winner was UC Davis for the Equitable Access Program. So this is getting a lot of international attention because it is a total paradigm shift in the way textbooks had been done in the past. And that concludes my portion of the presentation. So I will turn it back to Dale.
Congratulations on that award. That's awesome. I was wondering, Jason, if you could do a bit of a deeper dive into how the 199 was established initially, and how, I guess, how would you respond to somebody that says, well, you're just averaging the cost, and so, you know, half your students are actually paying more and the other half are the ones that are benefiting?
That's a really great question, Dale, and I'm going to take the second part first, and I might need you to remind me of the first part. So the second part of the question is, and it's something that gets questioned often, is this program fair, right? Fair is a loaded word, obviously, right? And so I'm not here to make an ethical judgment on what's fair and what's not fair. What I'm here to do is say that we try to treat this cost the way higher education in general has made an ethical decision, certainly within the University of California system. I would imagine it's the same in Missouri, but I'm not certain of that, that all students pay the same amount regardless of what the situation is. So if you think of student health insurance, the student who never goes to the health insurance, you could say they're subsidizing the students who are sick. Well, yeah, that's how insurance works, right? And you can say that the humanities majors, that their tuition dollars are subsidizing the STEM majors. Yeah, that's exactly how it works. That's how everything on campus works, right? Every student pays the mental health fee, but only 17% of students actually go for a therapy appointment. And so again, I'm not saying whether this is ethically correct or not. I'm saying that textbooks were the only outlier in the way that we charge students on a college campus. All other costs were the same for every college student with the exception of textbooks. And so that's how we answer the, is it fair and are some students subsidizing others? We're very open. Absolutely, some students are subsidizing others. That's how a flat rate works for everything. In our personal lives, you know, those of us who have car insurance, every year that we don't get in an accident, we're subsidizing the people who have an accident, right? That's how it works. That's how public funding in general typically works. So that's how we modeled this program. And that's how we respond to that question. So the first part was, how did we come up with the 199? So I mentioned we work with the actuarial sciences firm, but the way we do that is we use Banner as our registrar system. And so we download the schedule for all 31,000 undergraduate students. And they, so then we then cross-reference the schedule. So that results, by the way, in a 660,000 row spreadsheet. So this is why you can imagine, I don't want to calculate this myself. I would rather have an external expert evaluate that. But we take that 660,000 row spreadsheet, which literally just has every course every student is enrolled in. And we cross-reference that with our textbook adoption list. And that's what we send to our actuarial sciences firm. So they can tell that this is what the cost of the program is, assuming adoptions stay the same. We know that adoptions don't stay the same, so there is a little bit of risk priced in. And we also tell the actuarial science firm the other costs that we have to cover. I mentioned our bookstore salaries and benefits, for example, of the people just in the textbook department. And so we tell them what that number is, so they build that in as well. And so that's sort of how it works. So we take all the student schedule information, cross-reference it with the textbook adoption information, and then the actuarial science firm gives us a recommendation, but they can only give us recommendations based on the level of participation that we think is going to happen. So in year one, 54% of our students participated, 46% of our students opted out. In year two, 70% of our students participate and about 30% opt out. We think that number will keep increasing, just like it did. Streaming and subscription services didn't take off overnight. As you may recall, Netflix started out mailing DVDs back and forth to people. And it took a while before streaming became the predominant method of their program. And so we expect perhaps next year will be around 80%. But we always do think that there are going to be students who will opt out, and we will always allow that to take place. So that's kind of how we came up with that price. And we do reevaluate it every solitary academic year.
Great, appreciate that. Just a reminder to the attendees, feel free to pop on that Q&A and ask questions, and I will work them in to the panelists as we're able. So we'll turn it over now to Bob. So Bob Jansen is the Director for Retail Operations at Three Rivers College. Bob has spent the last 25 years working at 4 schools in higher education: Southeastern Illinois College, Southern Illinois University, Middlebury College, and currently Three Rivers College. He has spent the majority of his career in college stores and course material management. Bob, I'll turn it over to you.
Do you see that?
Yep, we're good.
Okay. Let me go on to, okay, you know, my program, I spent the last couple years kind of researching this. I looked at the UC Davis model quite a bit, and many other colleges that were in this space. There's not that many. We started a year after Jason did. We started in summer of 2021. We also beta tested it, though. A form of it, we beta tested IA, which is inclusive access, which was a more variable rate per credit hour. And what happened is during the pandemic, suddenly nobody could come into our store. So I had to come up with an approach to get course materials to students. So we had to ship everything at that point. And right at that time, we were 50% rental, 25% digital, and 25% purchase books. We're a 2-year school, where Jason's school is a 4-year school. He's a larger institution, and we are a smaller 2-year school. And the 25 years, you know, I've been in this space a long time. I actually started in the industry back in 1979. And I've worked at 5 college bookstores, 4 colleges and universities over 3 states. We call our fee, which is a little different than Jason's. He has a flat rate per quarter. And he has mostly full-time students, and we have a lot of part-time students. So we put our rate at $24 per credit hour, and we call it a resource fee. And it's included in tuition and fees. It includes all required course materials. And like I said, 75% are physical, whereas UC Davis is mostly digital, 85% digital. We're 25% digital. And it also includes all course supplies, so labs, uniforms, and other course supplies that are required. Another way to look at this is, in terms of textbook cost, is the cost of attendance. It's what's used to award financial aid at Three Rivers College. It's the real accessibility and affordability challenges for students. You know, I think the big problem with course materials over the years is that it's been a la carte. It's been this extra charge you have to go over here to get. well, rather than being integrated with the course. But if you look at it on the big scheme of things, it doesn't even show up as a real cost. I mean, room and board at a community college here is almost 40% of the cost of a student. Personal and transportation, just gas to get to the community college, and personal things is, almost 30%. Then you have tuition and fees at 26, almost 27%. And course materials here is only 4.12%. At a school like UC Davis, compared to the tuition fees, it would be even smaller. So what we've discovered, or what I've discovered over these, going back 40 years, is student ability to access course materials is not really an affordability problem. It is less about costs than how the costs are billed. And equitable access solves that problem by weaving course materials cost into tuition and fees. So what does equitable access solve from our standpoint? Similar to UC Davis, I mean, in this case, total educational costs are known in advance. Like UC Davis, we're seeing increased procedural efficiencies through our program for everyone being opted in. And we're starting to see ways we can reduce costs. We're a year behind them. And we have, I've looked at their model. There's a lot of ways we can reduce our costs too. The other thing it does is it levels the playing field between degree programs. In our model and in Jason's model, we can import OER, and we're looking at more and more OER, digital, physical, course supplies on day one. The other thing it did for us is that on the physical side of the equation, since we're so heavy that way, we actually opened our website for ordering 2.5 months earlier than we normally did in the past. We opened when registration opened in October of this year for our January term. We're a semester-based school. So it actually gave day one access almost 3 months early on course materials. Digital was still day one, and that was through our LMS, through Blackboard, and we use Red Shelf as our provider. The other thing about an EA model, at least at a 2-year school and a 4-year school, is that all forms of financial aid now cover our resource fee. In the past, some forms of financial aid would not cover book costs. But under an institutional charge, which this is, like tuition fees, all forms of financial aid will cover it. The other thing about our program, how you know it's successful, and Jason pointed to the convenience of his model, is we've been in this 3 semesters deep, and we've had no student request to opt out of our program in any of the 3 semesters. Now they've looked at it, they considered it, but because our program is so robust, like Jason's program, it's more about convenience than it is about cost. So the big thing with EA is accessibility. Day one access for digital, day one access for, sooner for physical course materials. But accessibility also refers to convenience. It's billed with tuition fees. It's very convenient for students. So in our case, they log in and learn for digital through Blackboard. They scan and go in the college store for physical. And we provide free shipping to homes. And we're a 2-year campus. People live in rural areas. Our campus might reach an hour, 2 hours out by drive. In this time, our physical books, half of them we actually shipped out this spring semester. Affordability, again, $24 flat rate per credit hour. All students, it applies to all students, all degree programs. It's all inclusive. There's no hidden fees in our program. So if you say, well, you have nursing, it's a heavy intensive program. They have lab coats, we provide those. They have stacks of books, we provide those. Shoes, lab kits, physical lab kits that alone might have been $200 or $300 in the past. They're included in our program. And all of it shipped for free through our website. And this cost of attendance is a key element in the community college space because people come to your colleges many times for cost savings. And at our institution, you can get a Pell Grant. You can pay all your tuition fees and still have $1,000 left over to spend on other stuff. And that would include the course material. So they'd still have money left over from the Pell Grant without taking loans to be able to afford everything for gas and food after that. So the thing with our program, which is a little different than the UC Davis model because they're so heavy in digital, at the end of the semester, we require the return of all the physical textbooks because the average book in our program the physical book is over $100. Now, if we didn't do that, our program would cost a lot more. So we have to recycle those books. We do that through a serial barcode system that we can track the book to the student. And that applies to all textbooks we require the return. Now there's some things like UC Davis, they have a lot of disposable stuff that goes out the door and they don't want it back because there's a big cost associated with dealing with recycling books. So we don't recycle lab kits, workbooks, or uniforms or other stuff that can't be recycled. And we have a Dropbox. One of the advantages with the serial barcode system, we can use a Dropbox for a community college. They can come to our college and in the parking lot, return their book. So they don't have to come into the store even. They can return it in the parking lot, or they can mail it back to us if they want. The other thing that we're different is that we're actually into a lot of equity initiatives in the college store. We provide a meal plan card for some students on Pell Grants. We also do athletic meal plan card for athletic scholarships. And when you think of cost of attending or you think of retention and student success, the real things that are involved there are life issues like food. Can I pay my rent? Those are the things that interfere with the student's ability to be retained or to be successful. So we have a meal plan program that we have partnership with a grocery store, up to 25 restaurants, convenience stores for fuel. We also have a laptop rental or loaner program. Sometimes in cases, if someone asks me that a student needs something, we just scan it out to them at no charge. And we also allow students through our Amazon special order program to order laptops for classes. And they can charge it through the college store. If you want to know more about my program, I wrote an article that's in the January-February 22 issue of the College Store magazine. It's called Equitable Access, Top 10 Best Practices, How to Start Manage a Successful Program. And you might check that out. It's a more detailed program. It's more for college stores than it is perhaps other people. And that's my contact information there. And that's it.
Great, thank you for that, Bob. So can you give us a little bit more detail? It sounds like your program deals more with physical books. Can you give us a little bit more information on how much of it is print versus digital, and do you see that changing in the future? And what are your incentives to make
we're still 75% print. I'd love to get down to Jason's numbers because that could really drive down costs. They've been able to drive down costs tremendously through digital or EA or through library resources. We're aiming to go more in that direction. But we kind of started with what we had. And we had a model that was 50% rental, 25% digital, and 25% purchase of print books. But as I look into the future and I look at other models, EA provides the door to everything good that was lacking in the old a la carte model most bookstores had. And it needs to go, the a la carte model for bookstores needs to go away. Why would you allow a student to come to an institution, enroll, and then be stopped by the cost of books? It doesn't make sense. It's next to the faculty in the classroom. The course materials is the second most important thing in the learning process. So the more you weave it into the learning process and make it easy and convenient for students, they'll do it, because it's really it's really a minor cost when you look at institutional costs like tuition fees, housing, room and board, and the rest. So we're moving in more of Jason's direction. And he, you know, I spent a lot of time looking at the UC Davis model and others. And I wrote maybe 5 or 6 papers on the topic after that, after seeing UC Davis.
So I have another question, and this is for either of you or both. But I was hoping you could talk a little bit more about how OER works with your program. As we know, OER is much more of a grind. It's harder to get those adoptions. It's harder to maintain those adoptions long term. One of the big selling points with OER is a faculty member can have direct impact on their students for that semester. And in these programs, that direct impact, that immediate impact is taken away. And so I was hoping each of you could kind of talk about how OER fits and how it is incentivized in your programs.
I think Jason should take this one. He has a bigger OER program.
Sure, happy to. So it's a great point, Dale, because it is a, you know, when you change a paradigm, you know, any kind of change is sort of difficult for lots of us to process, right? And so for our OER community, particularly those faculty members who have spent the time and the resources to structure their course around OER, they did feel that they were perhaps going to be penalized by this program because their students would be paying something theoretically if they participated in their program. Now, of course, if students opt out, they're still not paying anything, right? And as I mentioned, you know, tens of thousands of students have opted out. And so the way we talk about it is that, you know, our role is to help students as a whole, not individual sections of courses, right? And so while a faculty making an individual OER decision may impact one individual section, by OER being into this entire program, it drives the overall cost down for the entire institution. But also I mentioned that we provide an incentive to faculty by those faculty who do adopt OER and make it as part of our program. We are providing $10 per enrolled student to the Aggie Open project, which is administered by our library. We're a member of that committee, but it's mostly faculty members, to try and promote the use. Because what's sort of interesting, and you know, I want to be very honest on this call. I know that there's a lot of library and OER individuals on this call. And so I'm going to be open and honest about how I used to feel about OER and how I feel about OER today. So in the past, I would say, oh, OER is so good for the student, but boy, it makes my job 1,000 times harder because I'm a self-supporting unit on campus and I still have costs that I have to manage and I still have a budget that has to balance. And so I had very mixed feelings about it. I felt like it was really good for the student, but it wasn't really good for the bookstore because I had costs to manage. In this model, it's good for all of us, right? Because for the first time, OER benefits the bookstore. In the past, OER harms the bookstore because it took revenue away from the bookstore. Today, every time I get an OER adoption, it helps my finances dramatically because even though I'm paying $10 to the library, I would have been paying perhaps $30 or $40 to a publisher. And so my costs, again, my revenue is fixed. And every time OER library content gets adopted, my expenses decline. So now all of a sudden, there used to be certain factions of the campus that felt OER was benefiting them. and certain factions of the campus, those within auxiliaries that are self-supporting and receive no university support whatsoever. We don't get any tuition or fee dollars at all. We completely have to support ourselves. So it's game changing in that aspect, is that I no longer have to support it intellectually and emotionally, but worry about it financially, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's great. So there was one question in the chat that Jason responded to, but it had to do with if your campus has a for-profit company running your bookstore, and how you might broach those conversations on your campus to have it no longer be for profit. That's a tough conversation, to have. I'll just add, Jason responded, I'll let you read that, but I'll just add, that's typically a business decision for a campus, and it's based on the individual campus priorities, and every campus is different. Even if you're a campus ran or an independent bookstore, your campus still may be needing revenue to fund certain projects or certain departments, and they need that revenue from the campus store. There is fewer layers of revenue that takes place on it with an independent store. A lease operator has to generate revenue. It's a business decision for them, understandably. It is for the campus too. They have to generate revenue, and they have to generate revenue for the campus. And so one of those is eliminated when there's not a lease operator, but oftentimes there's still revenue that needs to be generated. So to take a leap to Jason's model of we're no longer going to generate revenue, that's a harder conversation to have. It's certainly the political winds are certainly blowing in the right direction to be able to say, that generating revenue off course materials is no longer politically palatable. And I know we've ran into that here at University of Missouri over the last 3 or 4 years too. So that the winds of change there are blowing. And so I'll just leave with that. Anything else to add about that, Bob or Jason?
EA sort of takes a lot of that conversation off the table. As Jason's indicated, through OER, he's able to drive down his costs. That allows him to generate more equity money or more money to help students. That's a good thing. He can give more scholarships. He can do other things. When you put a for-profit company in there, and I've worked for one of the 5 bookstores I worked for like 1.25 years. And it's the most terrible thing an institution can do. They're essentially selling out their soul to this for-profit company. A bookstore well-run like UC Davis or my store is very effective at generating revenue. It's the institution as a whole must decide, how are we going to use that revenue? Are we going to use it to lower cost? Are we going to use it for scholarships? And with EA, the book or the course materials is tied to the class more and to the faculty more. Once you put a for-profit company in there, they have their own concerns. Some of them are cookie cutter operations out of another city, and they can't really have the heart and soul of the institution. And I think outsourced is the worst thing possible that an institution can do to the very fabric of who they are. It's a terrible decision. EA changes that whole conversation. It's a game changer.
The only thing I would add is, to expand on sort of what Dale was insinuating, is whether a store is self-operated or lease operated, and I saw Rich put something similar to this in the chat. So our campus used to profit from merchandise and from textbooks. And our campus made a decision that we no longer find it politically palatable to profit from textbooks, so we only profit from merchandise. So the point that I was trying to make in my chat response is an institution that has a lease store can also make that decision and tell the lease operator, we want to collect money from our t-shirt sales, but we don't want to collect money from our textbook sales. So very often the way a lease model works is the institution gets a percentage of sales. So if the institution were, so let's say it's 8% of sales, right? So the institution could say, we want to continue taking the 8% of sales from everything but textbooks. And so that allows the lease operator to no longer have to pay the institution for those textbook sales. And so they can make the same decision that we made. We used to be in a profit model for textbooks too, right? And so I hope that makes it a little more clear.
Great. Well, I don't have any other questions there in the chat, so I think we can wrap it up. Thank you, Bob and Jason, for doing this. Really appreciate hearing from the both of you. Let's see, I have a couple items here. Make sure you provide feedback on this session through the survey that will pop up once the session is ended. An overall conference survey will be emailed to you after the conference. And the next session, I believe, is not till tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. So we will see you there. Thanks.